They say that a magician should never reveal his tricks. You should never explain how come there is a white rabbit in your hat. It's the appeal of magic of not knowing. But today, even though I am not a magician, I will explain to you how a sermon is being written. There is a white rabbit somewhere there hiding. The biggest and the hardest part of writing your sermon or your homily is eliminating all the unnecessary ideas that come to your mind. Because when you look at Sunday readings, the first from the Old Testament, the second from the New Testament, then the Gospel, hundreds and hundreds of ideas come to your mind. And you think to yourself, oh, I would like to talk about this Sunday. Then you go 2 sentences further and say, oh, this sounds good as well. Let's talk about that. Then you turn the page and you think, oh my God, I have to talk about this issue. And by the end, you have a dozen or so themes for one sermon. And each one of these themes sounds very enticing. But if I was to preach on 12 subjects that came to my mind after these Sunday readings, we would be here for another 2 or 3 hours. So the very painful part of preparing a sermon is cutting things off, deciding on one single subject, on one single theme that you want to focus on that particular Sunday Mass. Because if I was to preach on 5 or 6 subjects, I guarantee you would not remember any of them. But there is a hope that if I focus on one theme, at least 10% of you will remember something. So I am cutting things off today. And even though I would love to preach on the first reading how some of the Jews were jealous, I would love to preach about James' letter about the abuse of the poor and the workers, but I am deciding to look at one single theme. When Jesus says in the Gospel, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. If your foot causes you to sin, cut it off. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. So it will be about cutting things off from your life. In the Gospel, Mark says that Jesus warned his disciples to cut things off unless they want to end up in Gehenna. Now that's a strange word, strange name, that is not an English word, and usually we associate the word Gehenna with hell, right? We think, cut it off if you don't want to go to hell with 2 eyes, or with 2 hands, or 2 feet. Well, that's not necessarily what Jesus had in mind. When I was in Jerusalem in July, I went to Gehenna, and I came back alive. You see, there is a valley of Hinnom just outside the walls of Old Town in Jerusalem that is precisely what we know as Gehenna, the valley of Hinnom. And in the old times, they say it was used to throw away all the trash and impurities from the old city, and there was a fire burning at the bottom of the valley to dispose of the trash. So day and night, inhabitants of the old town of Jerusalem would use that valley, since there was no trash service at that point yet, to throw out anything they didn't need, they wanted to dispose of, and they burnt it to keep it more or less sanitary. So his listeners of Jesus would think of Gehenna as a place that smells, stinks, and there is a fire burning all the time. They will think of it as a trash disposal place, a place where you throw things you don't use anymore, or things that are not good for you anymore. Maybe things that you have outgrown or that stop your growth and limit your progress. So the big question we have to ask ourselves is, what are things in our lives that can or perhaps should be cut off? What are our activities, our lifestyle elements? What are the parts of my experience that I should be cutting off and getting rid of them? There is a place in our lives to throw things away. Call it Gehenna, call it a spiritual trash compactor, but find a place that you will remove things from your life that no longer serve you. Pope Francis, 2 weeks ago, decided to throw away some things from the practice of the Roman Catholic Church. He has reached the point when he realized those things don't serve our church anymore. So he put them in a Catholic trash compactor. If you follow the news, there was a major earthquake in the Vatican 2 weeks ago when Pope changed the canon law in regards to the annulment process. Some of you know what annulment process is. That is what happens when two Catholics want to get a divorce. They have to go to a judge in the chancery and apply for annulment. It's often referred to as a Catholic divorce paper. Until 2 weeks ago, there were 2 levels of that process. First, you had to be judged on your local level in your home diocese. So you would apply for annulment in the chancery of St. Louis Archdiocese. And if you were lucky enough, after several months, they would declare your marriage null and void. Then the same case, all the papers would go to different dioceses to make sure that the first judge did a good job. So the process basically was repeated twice. The Pope decided 2 weeks ago, we can get rid of it. Once is enough. So since 2 weeks ago, there is only one level to annulment process. It is enough to have your marriage annulled in your home diocese. No more second level of annulment process. He also got rid of something very, very important. He decided that all the annulment process should be free of charge. And I'm thinking, no wonder there is revolution against him in the Vatican. Annulment process free of charge? What all the canon lawyers do now? But this action of the Pope is a great example of necessity to get rid of things, to clean your spiritual household once in a while, to cut off things that don't serve you anymore. What are the things in your life that don't serve you anymore, that don't make your life better, that perhaps hinder your growth, your spiritual journey, that perhaps hinder your relationship with your spouse, with your boyfriend, with your girlfriend? Each one of us has a chance to look into our lives and decide, keep this, get rid of that. Now notice something very interesting. Jesus says, when your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. I'm thinking just one eye. When I sin with my eyes, I sin with both eyes, right? Imagine looking at dirty pictures with one eye only. Does anyone do that? If you look at something that you shouldn't look at, you look with both eyes, correct? You don't say to yourself, this is my dirty eye, this is my holy eye. But Jesus says, keep one eye just in case you need it. Even though you sin with both eyes, get rid only of one eye. Now, when you steal something, do you keep your good hand behind so it stays holy, and you steal with only one hand? Usually, when your hand causes you to sin, you use both of them. Usually, when your feet take you to a sinful place, you use both of your feet. You don't jump on one foot to go somewhere where you shouldn't go, correct? And yet, Jesus says, cut off one foot only. Perhaps you may need one for another time. This is the beauty of Jesus' message. It is always about balancing your life. It is about finding a healthy middle road in your life. Yes, there are things that we should cut off from our lives, but don't become too radical. Don't be a purist that will cut off everything. Keep one eye just in case. Keep one hand because you may use it. Keep one foot because you will need it. Yes, they both cause you to sin, but don't go overboard. Sometimes it is important to remember what to do and what not to do, what can be added and what should be taken away. On September 26th, which was yesterday, but in 1960, in the US there was the very first televised presidential debate. So yesterday we had the anniversary of the very first televised presidential debate between J.F. Kennedy and Nixon. You remember the debate, some of you? Nixon was vice president for 8 years. He was a well-experienced politician. JFK was a newbie. And yet, at the end of the debate, everybody knew that JFK won this big argument. Later, they found out that Nixon refused to accept any makeup on his face. He told the producer that he is a manly man and he shall not wear any makeup. Unfortunately, he had cold, he was sweating, he looked very pale and unshaved on TV screens. And he lost this debate badly. Sometimes you need to know what to add into your life. And I have friends, lady friends, who sometimes use too much makeup, sometimes they don't use enough makeup. And perhaps we need to find such solutions in our life. Where is the middle road? Do I wear too much makeup on my face and nose? Or should I add just a touch here and there? When, after Vatican II, the Church changed many of its rules, people got rid of many good things. If you go to other Catholic churches, you will realize there are no more statues, no more holy paintings, no more traditional things. And perhaps sometimes we go too far in cutting things off in our life. Sometimes perhaps we throw things away without proper reflection, without asking yourself, do I need to pluck out 2 of my eyes? Great example is clerical vestment. Last week you witnessed 6 of our seminarians receive their clergy cassock for the first time. We continue using them even though people say it's very traditional. But I think it's a middle ground because we don't use Kappa Magna anymore. You remember some of the pictures of my beloved Cardinal Berg? His cassock not only is as long, as pretty as ours, but has 12 feet long train behind him. So perhaps we should cut the train off and get rid of this long, beautiful train from Middle Ages that used to cover horses behind, and keep it slightly shorter, but not get rid of everything at once. Today, this gospel passage invites you to find a balance in your life, to decide what needs to be cut off, what you can and should get rid of from your life, and what should be kept and nurtured. If your hand causes you to sin, cut off just one of them, because you may need another one to make a sign of the cross from time to time. Amen.